Oh, I already know, like it's been a mess. There were times I had like technical issues and like 1 second feels like 10 minutes. So,
Uh-huh, uh-huh.
oh, this has been a learning experience, all of us doing it together. So
Yes. Like now I'm looking at this little red light. Okay, crap.
sorry. Sorry.
No, it's all good. I know that there's probably people who will want to go back and watch this. So
Oh yeah, tell
so
everybody
like
we do post this on the RHAU website to have as a resource for people. So this whole series we've been putting on there, like my slides are on there and everything, just to let everybody know, just so it's full disclosure. So thank you.
yeah, thank you, Carissa. I think that I was going to share just a little bit of a personal experience with being in a situation where I was very highly agitated and some this was, keep in mind, this was like 22 years ago. So things have advanced quite a bit, but very inept de-escalation was happening. And so I just was going to share a little bit about what would have worked better in that situation for me. And then I wanted the people who have joined me today from USARA to also maybe share something about their experience with stigmatization, being judged. I know for me, oh, by the way, I said it already, but I am Marcy Gray. I work at USARA and I'm a woman in long-term recovery. And for me, that means that I haven't needed to create damage in my community for 22 years. Anyhow, so for me, when I was very much in the grips of addiction, my addiction was with methamphetamine. And during that time, I had accumulated a lot of shame and I really didn't want anybody to know. But some things had happened at my job. I'd gotten fired and I was trying to get off meth. It wasn't a good situation because it was really difficult to stop using. Um, and I had gotten fired from my job. So I went to that job to return my paycheck because I was like, well, I don't need this because there's no sense in continuing to live. So I was very agitated, very much in a don't care whether I live or die kind of situation. And the office manager was trying to help calm me down at the time. And I was very resistant to her calming me down because I wanted to make a point, right? I'm also very intoxicated. And so anyway, she was trying to calm me down. Please just sit down. And it was good for a minute. I started to calm down and I was listening to her. Um, but she had closed the door. And a minute later, I heard a police radio scanner go off. And I hadn't been informed that any authorities were going to come. And it immediately set me off. And I was so full of anxiety and fear because I didn't know what the next thing was gonna have happen. And as the police officer came through the door, I took one little leap on to the top of a desk and was trying to go through a plate glass window. And that's when the police officers like slammed me to the ground. And I just can see, and from there it was like, well, you're going to the hospital whether you want to or not. There was no conversation about it. It was really just you're going to the hospital, period. You can go in the ambulance, or you can go in the police car. And I remember that being like important that I was given a choice. Um, but because they let me choose police car or ambulance. But as it progressed, I crazily insisted that the only way I would go was in the front seat of the police car. And they did take me to the hospital, and from there it was just people telling me like, you are going to do this, you are going to do this, and then them bringing in security guards, and nobody really having an interest in asking me what is going on. What has got you so agitated right now? And I was just full of shame and fear. And looking back, I just wanted somebody to sit with me, to hear that I was scared. And I can't tell you what the exact like questions would have been, but just knowing that somebody was open to having a conversation with me and just hearing what I had to say, I can tell you today that it would have been so helpful. And I know because I work in a recovery support organization, I can tell you how important it would have been to have a peer support person, someone who had some lived experience with where I was at in that state of mind, just sitting with me. Not that they would have taken over anybody's job, but somebody who had experience with that type of a agitated state sitting with me. And so I'm a huge advocate and proponent of peer support. I think that it's invaluable to any organization, regardless of what organization it is, when you can have somebody to sit with you and share the experience. It can potentially de-escalate so many different situations. I know for me, sitting there wanting to figure out how to do something different with my life, being told, well, we need to get you a diagnosis first. That's not helpful. It's not help. I don't need a diagnosis right now. I need you to hear that I'm really scared and I don't know what to do. And to be able to say openly that I'm using a lot of drugs right now and I know it's damaging my life, without the fear of having that, oh wow, now we have a whole different direction to go because we have a drug addict on board. It literally took me, I think, 4 or 5 days of actually being in the behavioral med unit at the hospital to actually share that I had been using substances. So that was the situation for me. And I know that there were several other throughout my struggles that may have gone differently had somebody just really provided an opportunity for me to share. But what I wanted to do from here is allow some of my coworkers to share some of their personal experience. And it may have been different. Mine was a very outward confrontational type of agitation, and the de-escalation probably needed to look a little bit different because I was so confrontational. But I know that there's been situations where, I've been feeling judged and not heard while I was just sitting with somebody, and the agitation became very much internal. And, having been talking to somebody that had an awareness that she's shutting down right now, completely blocking out anything that's being heard. Oftentimes, if a peer is sitting with someone in that state, they're able to walk that peer through, like, okay, so I can tell what's happening right now is that you're shutting down. Let's just hear what they have to say. So there's so many valuable tools that a peer can use to help reduce the stigma and the shame that comes with actively misusing substances. So Kayla, would you like to share an experience that you've had in something similar?
Yes, thank you for that. So my name is Kayla Jensen. I work at the Salt Lake USARA office. I am the program manager. And there's so many different things that I can think of while using in areas of getting arrested, different things like that, where high anxiety, high stress levels for me. But I think the main thing that comes to my mind is actually when my daughter was removed from my care. This was the second time it had happened, and I had been using, me and my partner had been using. So that was already, we were high at the time. No one likes to have the cops come in with their parents with the intention of their children being removed, especially when I knew I was using, but I did not know at that time that is exactly what was going to happen. But to have, my apartment, essentially my little apartment, be swarmed with officers coming in, and it was, I saw it as aggressive because of the state that I was in. But to have all of that happen, and then to have the officers, I had no idea of what that was going to look like. After the fact, I was told by one of the officers that he was going to make sure I had nowhere to live. And so that scared me more. There was all these things. I watched my daughter be taken out of my arms by an officer, given to someone else, So all these things are pretty traumatic to go through. And I was in a pretty dark spot at that time. And so to have someone say, like, yeah, to understand the consequences of my actions, but to not come in and say those hurtful things to me to escalate that, right? Because that wasn't helpful for me to stop using. That fueled the fire of a dislike for authority at that time, which wasn't helpful either, because there had been trauma in my past as well. So it kind of just fueled that fire. And so that, I think that was the biggest thing. That's one of the biggest things that comes to my mind. Also, when I had my son, which was February of 2022, and I had been in recovery for quite a few years at that time, and I was approached by one of the staff at the hospital about my meth use. And I had been, like I said, in recovery. And just like the way that it was approached, I got anxiety, and I was like, I'm being threatened right now because of my use in the past. I'm being held this stigma over my head. And so it put me in a pretty dark spot several hours after I just had my son. And so that was really hard, right? And so if I hadn't been in recovery and where I was at, imagine what could have happened, my response, right? I had my husband there at the time, so that was helpful. And I did get a phone call from the pediatrician personally apologizing for how it was handled. And it was still such a great example of that stigma of my previous life. And so during both of those incidences of having someone come in with a different approach and saying, hey, like, this is what's happening because of this, this, and this. We are going to remove your daughter right now because you are high, you aren't safe for her to be around. And having a peer support there, like how powerful would that have been to have like myself there, right? If I could have been there for myself now, you know what I mean? That and saying, hey, like, you are going to be okay. There is an end to this. You can get reunification. This is what it's going to look like. It may be scary right now, but there's steps to take, because I had no idea. I had to figure it out through the waters myself until I was able to find people to help support me as well. And so I really like that peer support in both of those situations for me, of just like the trauma-informed care, right? I needed to be held accountable for my actions in different ways, right? The hospital setting could have been a conversation of, hey, like, I know in the past, yeah, all that, but the approach, was really off-putting. And so and again, in both those situations, peer support to help understand, to help say, hey, do you understand what's happening? Let's help bridge that gap, would have been invaluable for me.
Thank you, Kayla. And I will move on to our next friend, but does anybody at this point have questions about anything that Kayla and I have talked about, or just curiosity about any of it? Yes.
Sorry, I was trying to find the mic button. I didn't want you to move on. You said something about having trouble listening because you had a point to make. And I've had that experience with clients where I'm trying to talk through the situation with them, but they have this point to make, and maybe because of substances or a different train of thought than I'm on, it's not relevant or not logical to what needs to happen at that moment. What are your thoughts on how to kind of acknowledge someone's point, but also, kind of move them away from it?
I don't even remember what I said, so I'm trying to remind myself what the context is. However, but what, like when I have a point to make, I just want somebody to acknowledge that, yes, I actually hear you. And like Kayla was sharing, like I needed to be held accountable. I need to be held accountable for the things that I'm doing. It's not okay for you to treat our staff this way. And I hear that you are extremely scared. You're frustrated. And these are the steps that we are going to take at this point. I mean, I'm thinking of when I was actually in the doctor's office, and before the police came, had she just simply said, I want to make a point. I want you to know that I am upset that you fired me. And, like, and now I'm scared and afraid. But had she said, we're afraid for you, and we're going to bring some officers in to see if we could kind of diffuse the situation. But even just letting me know ahead of time, Because I mean, you all know when we get surprised with something, it escalates the level of anxiety tremendously. So I don't know if that's helpful, but you know, just really just affirming that I hear you. It's got to be super frustrating for you. And these are the steps that we're going to take at this point, and we'll continue to walk you through this as we go along. Was that helpful? Is it Chapel?
It is.
Okay.
You know, maybe my specific situation was just tricky because I tried to reflect that back to them, thinking of a specific incident, and I tried to reflect that back. You know, I can tell that you're really frustrated with us, and he told me that he was not frustrated. He was having a great day. So then I sent him in a whole other, you know, mad at me tangent. So I don't know. I've thought a lot about that situation and trying to figure out how we could have better de-escalated that.
So this,
Honest. Oh,
oh, sorry, Marcy.
go ahead, Kayla.
I was just going to say, so in those situations when like, someone is maybe physically irritable, things like that, and their voice or whatever doesn't match, say, I hear that you're saying that you're having a great day, and I'm noticing that, you know, you're whatever, you know, and so kind of contrasting the two and saying, I hear that, and this is what this is what I'm observing about the situation. And then maybe that can, you know, figure out what is really going on. Are they really agitated? Are they really irritated? Or, you know, X, Y, and Z.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because that obstinance is going to come in for sure. But I also think, you know, again, I will advocate for the value of peer support, because what a great opportunity to bring somebody in and say, you know, I would like you to just visit with this person for a little bit. I'm going to step away for 10 minutes. Why don't you visit with them, and then we'll reconvene in a few minutes. It may or may not work, but having somebody who's actually been in that very similar situation can oftentimes help diffuse it quicker.
That's great thoughts, both of you. Thank you.
Yeah, for sure. Mercedes, would you like to share a piece of your story?
Sure. Thanks, Marcy. I am Mercedes Morgan. I am with USARA in the Carbon Emery location located in Price. And we've got some Price people on here, so always happy to see you guys. The scenario that I would like to share about is actually when I was first entering into recovery, and I was personally experiencing a lot of ambivalence. I did not know if I had intentions of really truly wanting to get sober and enter into recovery. I wanted to get out of the current situation that I was in. Therefore, there were some steps that were taken, and detox was a part of that process. I'm from a very small town originally, and so my impression of what recovery was you just stopped misusing substances, and then you were okay. And you went to work and you took care of your kids, and your family was a part of your life. I did not know that there were supports available. I did not know there were things outside of inpatient treatment facilities. And so when I went into detox, like I said, I was in a place of ambivalence, and I was just inconsolable, just sobbing, because I was scared that I was going to get sober, but I was also scared that I was going to not get sober. And I didn't really know where I wanted to land on that spectrum. I wanted to like maybe stop misusing substances, but like maybe do it later. Wasn't quite sure. And so I had a lot of medical personnel that offered advice, offered suggestions. But some of the things that are very, very big in my brain still is I had a nurse say, it's going to be so good for you when you get sober and you change from being a bad person to a good person, and you get to be there for your kids and you get to be a good mom. And that was really hard for me to hear, because in my brain and in the situation I was in, I was being the best mom that I could be under those circumstances, and getting honest and being willing to go to detox was me truly trying to be the best version of myself, not only for me, but for my children. And it was really, really terrifying to take that step and be honest. And I think it came from a place of trying to be supportive, but again, it was somebody without any lived experience that did not realize how damaging and harmful the words they were using were for me. I also was very much left out of the loop. I checked into detox and I was under 90 pounds. I was covered in bruises. I had a broken wrist, 2 broken ribs, 2 black eyes, and a broken nose. So I'd gone through it. I was not looking good. I was like that frail bird that flew into the window. That was me. And so people just, they looked at me and they saw that, and there was the immediate judgment of what my experience had been. And my experience in active substance use is very different than a lot of people. A lot of it was self-medicating by myself at home in the dark without any lights on. And so it was a really, really hard place to come out of. And when I got there and I was inconsolable and I was bawling my eyes out, they wouldn't let me have any water because they wanted to make sure all my tests came back. And so I took my IV and I went and stood in the shower and I let my mouth open and I let the shower water run in my mouth. And the nurse actually came in and they restrained me and put my hands on the bed so that I could not get up again. This was almost 10 years ago, but it was something that I felt even more terrified to ask for help, to talk about what I was experiencing, because I'd never done any of that before. So again, to hit on the importance of peer support, if I had somebody with lived experience that had gone through those things and had came in and just said, you know what, I'm someone in long-term recovery, and I've also been on the side that you're on right now. I've also been in that bed, and I've also been terrified. And I also wasn't sure what I wanted to do either. And that's okay, because you don't have to be 100% sure. You just have to be willing to look at the options. We just ask you to be open-minded, because what you're doing right now is really, really, really hard. And what we might do can also be really hard, but there's 2 very, very different outcomes. Would you be open to hearing a little bit of my story? And I think if I could have heard that and I could have had a little bit of hope, because I didn't have anyone in my life that I knew in recovery that was successful in recovery, that was proud to be in recovery, it was a very shameful thing for me. I was very much shamed by my family. If I would have had somebody there to just simply say, I get it, I think it probably would have alleviated a lot of the pain and suffering that I continued to go through after that process. Even in recovery, there was a lot of additional pain and suffering that was unnecessary. If I would have had people that could have met me along the way and maybe just shared a little bit of their personal experience, because I felt very alone in what I was going through, and not feeling a part of the conversation, not feeling like I knew what the next step was. I was just kind of being toted from one spot to the next. It was like, okay, we go here and then here and then here, and you just need to be a part of it. And I really didn't feel like I had an option in any of it. So God willing, I'm still in long-term recovery today, and it worked, but there has been a lot of people along the way that have helped to pave that way for me to continue on the journey that I'm on today.
Thank you, Mercedes. Anybody have thoughts or questions for Mercedes?
I have a quick question, kind of just all out there. First of all, thanks for sharing everything. I'm like, it's just thanks. But if someone would have come to you and said, you know, I haven't been where you've been, I don't understand, but can you help me understand, or can you help me, like, just having that compassion, that trauma-informed care approach, having that, would that have helped in the situation too? Or have you had that approach help at times? Because, or to say, like, I can get you in touch with someone, but like, I'm here, I'm listening, because, you know, like, de-escalation is number 1. It's a behavior technique, or not behavior, a communication technique. Behavior is communication. That's what we're, like, everything is part of it. So listening and seeing all of it is so important. But having someone come to you and just be like, hey, I don't understand what's happening right now, help me. Would that have helped in any of the situations?
I absolutely believe so. I think in my setting, it was obviously a medical setting. And so a lot of what I saw was, oh, your anxiety is incredibly elevated. Here's what we're going to do. Here's the medication we're going to give you. Instead of somebody just simply saying, hey, I can see that you're a little elevated right now. Do you want to share about that with me? Providing a safe place just to talk, whether I would have been in a position to talk or not, I don't know. But I think having the validation of simply opening up the conversation and it being, I hear you, I see you, and I want to help you. Not I want to fix you, I want to help you. So I think absolutely that would have made a huge difference.
Yeah, I think definitely, you know, like we are probably all that everybody on this call is in a helping profession. And like what we want to do is help. And oftentimes that equates to fix. You know, we want to get this person into a calmer state so that not only are they feeling better, but that I'm feeling better, or the provider is feeling better, because it's not a comfortable place to be in, right? So our inclination is to fix it. But like Chris was just saying, you know, so much of behavior is communication from both sides. You know, when I'm highly agitated, I'm communicating to you that I need to feel safe and heard. And just having that space of non-judgment to be able to just share part of what was going on. You know, oftentimes for me, I've been in such an agitated state that I haven't been able to actually clearly tell you what's truly going on. But just knowing like, hey, when you feel like you're ready to talk about this or you want to share some more, I'm here. Giving those 5-minute breaks. I can tell that this is really upsetting for you right now. I want you to be safe. So I'm just going to sit silently, or I'm going to leave the room for 5 minutes or something to that effect. Those are all really beautiful tools in helping de-escalation, which obviously there's a broad range of escalated situations where none of that is going to be helpful, because you want that person to remain safe, and you also need to keep yourself and your staff safe. So, you know, just being able to like really read that piece where verbal communication can be so helpful. But let's see. How about Crystal? Would you like to share something from your perspective?
Can I ask a question really quick?
Yes. Please.
Mercedes, you mentioned having like the fear of getting sober while also having the fear of not getting sober. What would you say may be helpful, or like with sharing with somebody who could be escalated or like outside of their window of tolerance because they're having fear both ways?
My personal belief around that is just validating that they don't have to make that decision today. As of right now, we're just focusing on where we're at in this moment. And, you know, what do you want me to have as my biggest takeaway today? How can I support you in this moment? Because really, it took quite some time until I really bought into doing recovery long term. I was very fearful. The idea of never putting drugs and alcohol into my body again and having to manage life on life's terms was really, really scary. So I think just allowing them to be in that place and validate that they don't have to know if this is long term for them one way or another. We just know that today you're here. And that seems like a step in the right direction. You know, how can I help you today in this moment? How can I support you? Because you're showing up for yourself right now. And I'm so happy for you that you did that.
Thank you so much.
I just wanted to add on to that, which I think was awesome, Mercedes. Thank you. For me, I had been told what to do, how to do it for so long because of court systems, because of different things. And so when I was given the opportunity of what I wanted my life to look like and what I wanted my recovery to look like, I too, like Mercedes said, I didn't know there was like this whole huge community. I thought it was like this way, and this way. And I was like, this is never gonna, I can't fit into this mold. And so when those options of like, what makes you happy, all those different things, and like celebrating, showing up for myself, no one had done that for me up until that point of finding a peer support and doing all of that. It was like, why didn't you drug test? Why didn't you do this? Why didn't you do this? Why didn't you show up for this? It was never celebrating those little things that I was doing, which are so impactful, at least for me, especially in early recovery, because of such a long use of it, or a long history of use. And yeah, I think the ambivalence for recovery is really common. And I love that we're speaking up about that ambivalence now, instead of just saying like, oh, they're not ready, or oh, whatever. It's no, maybe it's just like that. Is it scary? It's scary to stop doing that and to stop relying on a substance to get you through a day. And so 100% ambivalence for quite a long time, and maybe still, like, it may still pop up, so that was great.
Thank you both so much for that.
Yes. Awesome stuff. Hopefully it's awesome for you guys. I sit here very proud because I think that the people I work with are fabulous. But Crystal, would you like to share a piece of your story?
Sure. I have an extensive history of all sorts of different situations. And I was sharing with Marcy earlier, my most of my situations come from, I mean, different random things, but I'm not a confrontational person, because I was raised not to be. And so the situations that I had were mostly shame-based, but one, and Kayla, when she was sharing, brought to mind a whole series of different events that I hadn't even thought about, but I'm not gonna go there. So about 17 years ago, I had a neck injury, and at the moment that it happened, I was using, and I didn't have insurance. I was in a rural area, in a not good marriage, and when it happened, I got laughed at, and it wasn't like an initial pain thing. So anyways, when I got insurance, I finally went to the doctor, because it was like debilitating. I couldn't function. So for about a month, I couldn't function. So by the time I got to the doctor, my doctor was out. So I got a substitute doctor. And as I'm explaining to him the situation, how it happened, how long it had been, what I'd been doing in the meantime to alleviate the pain, which there wasn't any, he attacked me, and he accused me of seeking medication. And he said, "What is it that you think that I'm going to do for you here?" And I remember just shutting down and being like, well, I don't know now, and I did ask, like, well, I just don't know what to do. And he said, "You didn't go to the emergency room, and you've made no record that this even happened. So how am I supposed to believe you? I'm not going to send you to a specialist, and I'm not going to give you medications. So there's really nothing for you here." And that was like, I remember I left there and completely shut down. And it was a long journey to get through that. And I go back to that moment, to that all the time. And I just think, like, the nurse just sitting there listening to him, the assistant just sitting there listening to him, and just the shame piece that came from that, and how much it would have made a difference if, I mean, she would have been able to speak up and just, anything. But the thing that sticks out the most is just somebody saying, "How can I help you?" And I know that's been brought up a lot, but how can I help you? What would where can we go from here? Anything other than just being absolutely shut down and told that there was nothing for me. And so I carried that with me for a very long time, up until like 5 years ago, honestly, that if there was something wrong with me, that there was no help for me. And just having somebody in that moment that would have been able to just sit with me and maybe hear hear what I was saying without just assuming that it was something other than what I was trying to say. And so I think the point that we try to make is very significant. When somebody is trying to make a point, there is a reason to them that they are trying to make a point. And being heard is very, very valid for that, for them. For if somebody would have heard my point of like, no, this is the point. Like, I didn't have the resources to immediately get help. I feel like it could have been treated completely different, but he wouldn't have it.
Thank you, Crystal. I know oftentimes in situations, and it doesn't always have to be with SUD, but we go in with our own implicit bias about a situation, and making that assumption before you actually have hurt somebody can be super harmful in any situation. I'm pretty confident that everybody on this call today has had some type of experience in that, where the bias of another person has really affected that communication. But thank you, Crystal, for sharing that piece. Does anybody have any thoughts or questions for Crystal before we move on to the next one? All right, Heidi, do you have anything you would like to share?
Sure. So my name is Heidi Thompson. I am with the USARA in the Grand County area. So I'm thinking of a situation when I first got into recovery. I was completely defeated. I carried a lot of shame, a lot of guilt. I started in recovery court and my children were taken from my custody. And I was really stuck in this place of like me versus them. Like I really felt unsupported. My family, my brother and my sister both worked for DCFS, and my dad was completely like unsupportive of where I was at. So I didn't have a license at the time because I had a prior DUI, and my children were 4.5 hours away, and my caseworker was 2 hours away. And I just felt really alone. And my internal dialogue was very abusive, honestly. And I remember a specific time where I was in a child family team meeting, and I was actually sitting in my recovery coach's office during this meeting because I didn't have like internet access. So I was sitting in this meeting with her, and I was just hearing echoes of my internal dialogue from, my caseworker, my family, and I was getting upset, like really worked up. And my peer recovery coach actually noticed the nonverbal cues. My nose was flaring and my face was turning red. And I just couldn't put into words like a couple of people have said. Like I didn't know how to voice what my needs were. I didn't even know what my needs were at the time. I just was feeling super attacked, and I was already beaten down, and I just felt like my children were better off without me, which was what I was already telling myself. And so my recovery coach noticed this, and she kind of just muted the call, and she started like saying, "Hey, I recognize that you're getting upset, but like the most important thing here to you, I already know is your children. And like, these are the things that I see you doing well," right? She started reminding me that, hey, you are in recovery for the first time in your life. You haven't failed any UAs. You are going to your meetings. You are coming in here and meeting with me. And, I know how important your children are to you. And also, I recognize the importance of connection in your life. And this is what's tripping you up. Like, how can we fix this? And just in that moment, it brought me to the total present. And I felt heard. I felt seen. I felt reminded of what I am fighting for and that I do have worth, So my experience was a little bit different because I did have that peer coach that was there to like sit with me and to remind me of my worth when I couldn't see it for myself. So that's what I was thinking. And I'm just super grateful that I had that in the beginning.
Thank you, Heidi. I appreciate all of you that are being open and willing to share some vulnerabilities with everybody. Because this is just real. This is just the real life stuff that everybody goes through. It's just a little more heightened when we're working with somebody that has SUD. Lynette, would you like to share a piece of yours, and then we'll let Damon share before we end this meeting? I know we're getting short on time. I just barely noticed, but so Lynette, I'll give you a few minutes and then we'll go to Damon.
Sure. Super. Yes, I've been like racking my brain. There's been so many times where I certainly could have used some de-escalation. Could have saved me some serious charges for sure. You know, most of my life I really struggle with methamphetamine and alcohol, and it's pretty prevalent in my family. So domestic violence and is definitely something that I have had a lot in my life. And so violence is definitely something that I have experienced in many different aspects throughout my years. And so one day, one night in particular that comes to mind, I had just gotten into it was a rough one. I'm gonna probably guess it was more alcohol involved, but I remember like getting into like this fist fight with a spouse, and then getting out of that, and then going rounds with a sister, and then trying to walk away, but like being blocked and stopped and not being allowed to like leave the situation. And then like once I finally did get away from the situation, I just remember like my mom, not to get too traumatic and into it, but my mom calling the police and then jumping into the car and like following me driving, like just like yelling these things like like horrible things at me, like just like making it worse. And I just remember like the amount of how upset I was. And I remember this cop, he came and he was awesome, but he came and like, I remember getting super extra upset because in the past, kind of like stories you heard here today, they would just kind of like put you up against the car and like handcuff you and take you to jail. But this time it was different, and I just kind of remember him like yelling, telling my mom to like shut up and leave me alone, and then asking me if I needed some space and to step away. And like I just remember that being exactly what I needed, and asking me if I just needed him to sit with me for a minute, and him just sitting with me, and not a single word being said for a long time, but just sitting with me in that moment in the dark. And then just him saying, like, I've struggled too. And then him just relating to me in that moment. And that being exactly what I needed to hear. And then him just reminding me that, I was worth fighting for. And although I did have to go to jail that night, that he was rooting for me. And it was the first time I'd heard that anybody was rooting for me in a long time, And that night really stuck with me. And it was the last night I ever went to jail. So 10 years ago, and it's probably one of the most valuable nights of my life. And so I will carry that with me forever. And to this day, that guy still is a huge impact in my life. So yeah, it was pretty cool. A little bit goes a long way.
Absolutely. Thank you, Lynette. It can't be said enough, the importance of really just sitting with somebody at times, rather than getting to that place of, oh, we got to get this fixed right now, but just sitting with somebody. We have a few more minutes. Anybody have any thoughts or questions for Lynette? Okay, Damon, would you like to share a piece of yours and then we can do some more questions before the end?
Sure, I'll be brief. I've had similar experiences. I've been through, a number of overdoses, been hospitalized a number of times. And over that, over the years, my trust in the medical profession and just, HIPAA violations and things like that had kind of started to rack up. And I knew that, a lot of the people that were being paid to help me were doing the opposite. They just weren't doing their job. However, my most recent visit to the emergency room wasn't related to a HIPAA violation, but in my mind, I was in a very heightened state of paranoia. And so HIPAA was all I could think about. Like, I just didn't feel safe in the hospital. I didn't feel like I could tell the truth and have it be heard in such a way that my best interests would be kept in mind. And it's sad that that was my experience, but up to that point, all I had done is my blood had been drawn, and I had met with the doctor, but I refused to speak to him. And each time he tried to approach me, I kind of just told him to fuck off. I mean, sorry to be blunt, but that's how I felt because of my paranoia, because I hadn't slept in 10 days. And I feel like in my mind, I had a very legitimate reason not to want to open up or talk to anybody. But thank God, Miranda Sacramento from Four Corners, and I'm going to use her name just because I love her so much and she needs to be talked about in this light because she does a good job of what she does. She came in and talked to me and sat down and talked to Damon. She didn't sit down and talk to a drug addict. She didn't sit down and talk to a criminal. She sat down and talked to a human being. And sorry, I didn't know I was going to be asked to share, you guys, but she looked me in the eyes. She sat down next to me and she just talked to me the way you would probably talk to your child, just very open and very honest. And she told me, she said, Damon, I understand. I know, I understand that we don't do a great job sometimes. As people, we all make mistakes in the hospital. And she even took accountability for herself. She said, we're never going to get it right, buddy, but we're here for you. And she was able to, like, by the time she was done talking to me, like, she was ready. She signed off for me to go home. She shouldn't have, but I hate to say that, but the doctor was really pissed off. But she had me in such a better place. Like, she really did. Immediately after she left, I was right back to, being Captain Insano. But she knew what she was doing. And I think that just making that personal connection and just being like, hey, dude, let's pump the brakes on all the professional designations and all the official responsibilities of this situation. And let's just, let's be eye to eye for a second and be two people in a difficult situation and figure a way out of it. And I eventually got help and everything's great. And yeah, that's what I got to share.
What a powerful thing, Damon. Thank you for sharing that, because overall, isn't that what all of us really wants, is that moment of being a human to human, not a doctor to a patient, but just human to human. And those moments are what are so impactful and meaningful. Annette shared about, I think we all have some of those moments. As Damon was sharing, I was like, oh yeah, that when I went to the hospital that time, I remember the one therapist that really saw me as just a human being. So how about thoughts or questions from anyone, or anybody want to add anything?
I just want to say thank you. Ashley posted in here, a lot of people are saying thank you, but she said, thank you for sharing. Your perspective is so insightful and hard to hear how traumatic people trying to help can be instead of validating. And that's, that's the point I wanted to come across. People think they're coming because they're coming from where they think it needs to be to help, when that's not what needs to happen. Because I'm not perfect. I've been in both sides of the coin here, like thinking I just know what to do. And, and it's just, just thank you. Thank you for being willing to share. You've changed me today and I needed that. And I just thank you. All of you. Thank you. Sorry.
It was it was definitely a pleasure, and I'm so grateful that you invited us, Carissa, and that we could be here to provide a different perspective for some of you. I know that every one of us on this call from USARA are all very open to further conversations if you're interested. We can all be reached at USARA, and
yes, when I
just-
post this, do you want to post some links? Because that's what we like to do also, is post some links like, this is how you get these resources, this is how you access this. We have the RHAU website, we have all of that on there too, but having stuff specific to this, Marcy, if you'd like to send me something, we can link to all of this, that would be great.
Okay.
And I don't know if you guys
Yeah.
can are reading all these comments, just everyone's
No, so appreciative
so much.
of
You're incredible. Thank you. I second all of
everyone.
it. Amen. So, and don't worry about the profanity. It's just language. It
That's
worked for
word.
the severity of the situation. So it got the point across. But yeah, just thank you.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. Appreciate you all.
Now we feel like we need to do like some mindfulness or something. Woo.
Yeah, everybody take a moment to pat yourself on the back or put your own hand over your own heart, because every one of us deserves to be seen, heard, and connected with. Yes, Damon, you got it. Butterfly hug.
I just want to say too, like, thank you for everybody who showed up here too and wanted to know more about like all of this. You guys play such an important, huge role in so many people's lives, and it takes like conversations like this to make a difference. So thank you. You guys are all amazing.
Same. And this will make differences, I know, for everyone that's here. This is, yep, we're all going away different. So thank you. Yes, I second Ashley. All the love.
Thank you, everyone, so much.
Hope you have a good rest of your day now. Hopefully the heavy.
You too.
But thanks.
Thank you.